The sickness began with a fever. Just a cough at first, harmless, like the flu. Then came the convulsions, the bleeding, and finally, the unthinkable. The dead refused to stay dead. It started in a small town, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors. When the first victim, a factory worker named Thomas Grady, collapsed in his home, paramedics arrived within minutes. His wife, a trembling mess, swore he had been sick for days. Fever. Chills. He kept talking nonsense, raving about hearing whispers in his head. Then he died, right there in the living room. Only, he didn't stay that way. By the time the ambulance reached St. Mary's Hospital, Grady sat up on the gurney. His skin had gone pale, his eyes clouded. The paramedics thought it was some kind of seizure, until he tore out of his restraints and ripped into one of them, teeth sinking into flesh like a rabid animal. The footage leaked online within hours. Blurry phone videos showed nurses and doctors scrambling as the infected man lunged at anyone in sight. Gunshots rang through the hospital halls. Grady should have been dead from the bullets, but he wasn't. Not until his skull was shattered. The world shrugged it off at first. A hoax, some claimed. A drug-induced psychotic break, others insisted. But the truth bled through in whispers. More cases popped up. First, in nearby towns. Then in cities miles away. Families vanished overnight, their homes left in eerie silence. Hospitals overflowed. The news played warnings on a loop. Stay indoors. Avoid the infected. Symptoms include fever, aggression, and abnormal strength. If bitten, seek immediate medical attention. But it was already too late. The collapse begins. In New York City, a man collapsed in the middle of Times Square. He stood up seconds later, his head tilting at an unnatural angle. When he lunged at a bystander, biting deep into the man's neck, the crowd's screams sent shockwaves through the streets. The infection spread like wildfire. Within hours, the National Guard was deployed. They set up barricades, issued evacuation orders, and enforced a strict quarantine. The government kept repeating the same message. We have the situation under control. It was a lie. Sarah Mitchell knew the world was ending the moment her phone vibrated with an emergency alert: stay indoors. Do not engage infected. Government response in progress. She stood frozen in her apartment, staring out the window as sirens wailed in the distance. Plumes of smoke curled into the sky. Gunfire crackled like popcorn. The city was coming apart at the seams. Her younger brother, Jake, sat on the couch, eyes glued to the TV screen. The news played footage of soldiers in hazmat suits torching corpses in the streets. The headline read, Virus 666, the deadly infection sweeping the nation. Sarah swallowed hard. 666? Someone in the media must have had a sick sense of humor. This isn't happening, Jake muttered, his voice small. He was 17, barely old enough to vote, and now he was watching the world collapse around him. We need to get out of the city, Sarah said, grabbing a backpack. She didn't know where they'd go, just that they couldn't stay. Then the screaming started. Down below, a woman sprinted through the street, blood streaking her clothes. A man, no, thing, chased after her, its body moving in unnatural jerks. It tackled her to the pavement. Tore into her like she was nothing but meat. Sarah turned away, bile rising in her throat. We're leaving, she said, more firmly this time. Jake hesitated, then nodded. They didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The infection was just getting started. And before the week was out, the world they knew would be gone forever. Sarah gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The streets of New York City, once overflowing with honking cars and impatient pedestrians, now looked like a war zone. Burned-out vehicles littered the roads, their windows shattered, doors left open in a sign of frantic escapes. Smoke curled into the sky from a nearby apartment building, the fire unchecked. Jake sat beside her, rifle in his lap. It had belonged to their father, a former Marine who had drilled gun safety into their heads since they were kids. Now, that training might be the only thing keeping them alive. We should have left sooner, Jake muttered, staring out the window. Sarah didn't answer. She knew he was right. They had waited too long. The city had turned into a death trap. They had barely made it out of their apartment complex. The infected were everywhere, shambling through the streets, drawn by sound, by movement, by anything that reminded them of the living. Those who weren't already turned were either dead or close to it. The news had stopped broadcasting that morning. No more emergency alerts. No government reassurances. Just silence. Sarah turned onto Fifth Avenue, swerving around an overturned police car. A body dangled halfway out of the shattered windshield, the officer's face frozen in horror. Blood smeared the pavement. "This isn't real," Jake whispered. "It's like a nightmare." "It's real," Sarah said, scanning the road ahead. "And we have to focus. If we stop, we're dead." They needed to reach the highway. If they could get out of the city, maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. No safe haven. As they approached an intersection, Sarah slammed on the brakes. A military blockade stretched across the street, lined with sandbags, abandoned Humvees, and the bodies of soldiers. Jake swallowed hard. Jesus. Sarah's breath came in short, shallow bursts. They weren't the first ones to try escaping the city. The military had tried to hold the line, and failed. She reached for the gear shift. "We're turning around." Then she heard it. A deep, guttural moan. She looked up just in time to see movement behind the barricade. A soldier staggered to his feet, or what was left of him. His uniform was torn, blood-soaked. His face, it wasn't human anymore. His eyes were pale, cloudy. A gaping wound in his neck still oozed dark, congealed blood. And he wasn't alone. One by one, the corpses stirred. Soldiers, civilians, even a child, rising, hungry. Jake clutched his rifle. "Go," he hissed. Sarah threw the car into reverse just as the infected let out an ear-piercing shriek. The horde charged. A desperate escape. Sarah floored it. The tires screeched as the car shot backward, narrowly avoiding the first of the infected. One of them, a woman in a hospital gown, lunged at the passenger window. Her face slammed against the glass, teeth snapping. Jake shouted, raising the rifle. "Don't shoot!" Sarah yelled. "It'll draw more of them." Instead, she whipped the wheel, sending the car into a hard turn. The infected tumbled away as she sped down a side street. But the noise had already drawn others. Dozens of figures staggered out of alleys and storefronts. Some ran. Others shambled. But all of them had the same dead, hungry look in their eyes. Jake cursed. "We're not gonna make it." Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't stay on the main roads. The bridges were probably barricaded, or worse, destroyed. Then she spotted it. A parking garage. She yanked the wheel and skidded into the entrance, the car's tires squealing as they raced up the ramp. The infected followed, their moans echoing against the concrete walls. Sarah gunned it up 3 levels before slamming the brakes. "Out," she ordered. They didn't have time to argue. Jake grabbed the rifle, and they bolted from the car, weaving through abandoned vehicles. "They're coming up," Jake warned. Sarah spotted a maintenance door on the far side of the garage. She sprinted for it, praying it wasn't locked. She grabbed the handle. Twisted. It opened. "Go," she yelled. They burst through the door and into a stairwell. The sound of the infected grew louder behind them. Sarah shoved the door shut and locked it just as something slammed into the other side. For a moment, they just stood there, panting, listening to the inhuman shrieks beyond the door. Then Jake exhaled sharply. "Okay," he muttered. "That was too close." Sarah nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "We need to find a way out of the city. Fast." Because the infected weren't slowing down. And soon, there would be nowhere left to run. The sun dipped below the horizon as the SUV rumbled down a narrow, tree-lined road. The deeper they went, the darker it got. Towering pines cast long, shifting shadows, and the eerie silence made James' skin crawl. After everything they had seen in the city, the quiet felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. Emily sat up, pointing ahead. "That's the turn." James steered onto a dirt path, the tires crunching over gravel. A small, rundown cabin came into view, tucked between the trees. A rusted pickup truck sat in the driveway, and a chain-link fence surrounded the property. Marcus grunted. "Looks defensible." Lisa exhaled in relief. "Let's just hope there's food inside." They piled out of the SUV, weapons in hand. James checked the door, locked. Emily reached under a loose board on the porch, pulling out a spare key. As soon as the door creaked open, a musty scent hit them. Dust covered the furniture, but the place was stocked. Shelves lined the walls, packed with canned goods, bottled water, and boxes of ammunition. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Your uncle was ready for the end of the world." Emily forced a small smile. "He always said it would happen." "Guess he was right." They settled in, blocking the windows and securing the perimeter. For the first time in hours, they felt a sliver of safety. But it didn't last. Lisa sat on the couch, scrolling through the last news reports on her phone. Most stations had gone dark. The ones still broadcasting were repeating the same grim warnings: stay indoors. Do not engage the infected. No known cure. Then, a new voice crackled through the speakers. "If anyone is still alive, if you can hear this, listen carefully. My name is Dr. Evelyn Carter. I worked at the Blackwood Research Facility. I know where virus 666 came from." James and Marcus locked eyes. This was no accident. The virus was created as a bioweapon. It was supposed to be controlled, used for warfare. But something went wrong. It mutated. Now it's spreading faster than anyone predicted. And it's not just reanimating the dead. Lisa sat forward. What does she mean? The infected are changing. Some are getting faster, smarter. If we don't stop it now, it won't just be an outbreak, it'll be extinction. The transmission cut off. Silence filled the cabin. Emily swallowed. That means there's a cure, right? If she worked on it, she must know how to stop it. James clenched his jaw. If she's even still alive. Marcus checked his pistol. Either way, we need to find her. If there's any chance of stopping this, we take it. Lisa hesitated. And if we can't? Marcus looked her dead in the eyes. Then we make damn sure we don't end up like them. A branch snapped outside. Everyone froze. James motioned for silence, creeping toward the window. His heart pounded as he peeked through the curtain. A shadow moved between the trees. Then another. The infected had found them. But something was wrong. They weren't running. They weren't snarling or thrashing mindlessly. They were watching. And then, as if they understood exactly what they were doing, they smiled. The eerie grins of the infected sent a shiver down James' spine. These weren't the mindless monsters they had faced in the city. These creatures knew they were being watched. "Tell me I'm imagining things," Lisa whispered, gripping her pistol. "You're not," Marcus muttered, keeping his rifle trained on the nearest one. Emily whimpered, backing away from the window. They're just standing there." James clenched his fists. "They're waiting for something." Suddenly, one of the creatures stepped forward. It was a tall man, or what used to be a man. His skin was stretched tight over his skull, his eyes sunken and black. The infection had twisted his body, but he wasn't staggering or twitching like the others. He moved with purpose, his lips curling into something disturbingly close to amusement. Then, he spoke. "You can't hide forever." Lisa gasped. No. No, no, no. They don't talk." James' blood ran cold. The infected man turned his head slightly, like a predator studying its prey. "You will join us soon." Without warning, Marcus fired. The bullet ripped through the creature's forehead, sending it crashing to the ground. For a moment, silence. Then, screeching. The rest of the infected exploded into motion, sprinting toward the cabin with inhuman speed. Inside. "Now!" Marcus roared, slamming the door shut just as the first monster slammed into it. The walls shook as clawed hands pounded against the wood. The windows rattled. "They're gonna get in!" Emily cried. Marcus turned to James. "We need to hold them off while we figure out a way out of here." James grabbed a shotgun from the prepper's stash and tossed a rifle to Lisa. "We hold the doors. Aim for the head." A window shattered. A hand shot through, grasping wildly. Lisa screamed and fired, blowing the creature's arm clean off. But it didn't stop. The infected kept clawing, even as black ichor leaked from its wound. "They don't feel pain," Lisa shouted. James fired his shotgun through the hole in the window, blowing a second one back. "Then we make sure they don't get back up." Marcus kicked over a heavy bookcase, barricading the front door just as another infected slammed against it. "We need to move, now. We can't stay here." Emily's eyes darted around in panic. "There's a cellar. Under the rug." James yanked the old rug back, revealing a wooden hatch. "Go! Now!" One by one, they dropped down into the dark space below. James was the last, slamming the hatch shut just as the door burst open upstairs. Heavy footsteps. Snarling. And then, something worse. A low, guttural voice echoed above them. "Find them." Lisa clamped a hand over Emily's mouth to stifle her whimper. James barely breathed. The evolved were here. The cellar was pitch black, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. James held his breath, listening. Above them, heavy footsteps creaked across the cabin floor. The evolved were searching. Their movements were deliberate, not the erratic shuffling of typical infected. Lisa's grip on Emily tightened as the girl trembled in her arms. Marcus crouched low, his rifle trained on the hatch, finger hovering over the trigger. Then came the voice again. Low. Calculated. "They're close." James felt the hairs on his neck rise. The infected weren't just hunting by sound. They were thinking. A long silence stretched. Then, sudden movement. The footsteps retreated. A door slammed. Then nothing. James waited. 5 seconds. 10. Marcus exhaled. "They're gone." Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper. "Or they want us to think they're gone." James reached out, feeling along the cellar's wall until his fingers brushed a pull chain. With a flick, a dim bulb buzzed to life, revealing the cramped space. It wasn't much, just shelves of canned food, old hunting gear, and crates of ammunition. But in the far corner, something caught James' eye. A metal door. Emily gasped. "The bunker." James turned to her. "Your uncle had a bunker?" She nodded quickly. "He never let me inside. Said it was for emergencies only." "Well," Marcus grunted, "this qualifies." James grabbed the handle and yanked. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a stairway leading even deeper underground. A cold draft hit them. Lisa hesitated. What if there's something worse down there? James glanced at the hatch above. There's something worse up here. One by one, they descended. The bunker. The bunker was larger than they expected. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing a concrete room lined with metal cabinets, maps, and survival gear. But something was off. The air smelled sterile, almost metallic. The walls were lined with computer screens, most of them dark. And in the center of the room, a body. Lisa gagged, stumbling back. The man had been dead for days. Dressed in military fatigues, his skin was pale, lips cracked. Blood crusted around his nose and mouth. But what stood out most was his arm. Or rather, what was left of it. It had been cut open, surgical incisions running down to the bone. Black veins ran along the exposed muscle, the infection frozen in time. Marcus crouched beside him, examining a small ID badge clipped to his vest. Dr. Adrian Wells. Blackwood Research Facility. James stiffened. Blackwood. The same lab that made Virus 666. Lisa looked at the monitors, pressing a few keys on an old keyboard. Some of these systems are still running. The screen flickered, displaying files labeled experiment logs. Emily peered over her shoulder. Play 1. Lisa clicked the most recent file. A video feed opened, showing a dimly lit lab. A scientist, Dr. Wells, stood in front of the camera, his face gaunt, eyes sunken. He looked exhausted. This is Dr. Adrian Wells, senior researcher at Blackwood. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. A deep breath. His hands trembled. Virus 666 was never meant to spread like this. It was supposed to be a controlled bioweapon, an enhancement to create stronger, more obedient soldiers. But it evolved beyond our expectations. Beyond our control. A clatter off-screen made him flinch. He turned quickly, his breath hitching. They've changed. They're aware now. They don't just hunt. They learn. If they find me, A shriek. Dr. Wells spun, knocking over the camera. The last thing the video captured was the sound of crashing metal, a guttural snarl. Then, screaming. The feed cut to static. Lisa covered her mouth. Jesus Christ. Marcus stood. If what he said is true, then we're not just dealing with zombies. We're dealing with something worse, James muttered. Emily pointed at another file labeled Antidote Research. Could that be a cure? Lisa clicked it open. A list of chemical compounds appeared, followed by a location, Blackwood Research Facility, Site B. That's where we need to go, James said. If there's any chance of stopping this, we have to find that cure. A thump above them. Everyone froze. Then another. And another. The evolved were back. And this time, they knew exactly where to find them. The first thump was followed by another. Then another. Heavy footsteps. Clawed fingers scraping against metal. The evolved were right above them. James tightened his grip on his shotgun. We need to move. Now. Marcus grabbed a rifle from the bunker's supply rack and checked the magazine. They know we're here. If we stay, we die. Lisa frantically scanned the bunker for another exit. There has to be another way out. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. The tunnel. They turned to her. My uncle always talked about an escape tunnel. Said if the government ever came for him, he'd disappear. She pointed to the far wall. It should be behind one of these shelves. James rushed over, running his hands along the metal shelves, searching for anything that felt loose. He yanked one hard, and it shifted. Help me move this. Marcus grabbed one side while James grabbed the other. With a grunt, they pushed it aside, revealing a hidden metal door with a heavy latch. A crash echoed above them. Emily screamed. The hatch leading to the bunker buckled as something powerful slammed into it. The metal groaned. James yanked the latch, and the door swung open, revealing a narrow concrete tunnel leading into darkness. Move! Marcus barked. Lisa went first, followed by Emily. James and Marcus took up the rear. The moment James stepped inside, the hatch above tore open. The evolved dropped into the bunker. One landed directly in front of the monitors, its skin stretched tight over sharp, unnatural bones. Its black eyes gleamed in the dim light. It turned its head slowly, lips curling into that eerie, knowing grin. Run, James breathed. The creature lunged. James dove into the tunnel, slamming the door shut behind him. A second later, something slammed into the other side with bone-crushing force. The metal door dented inward. James scrambled to his feet. Go! Go! They sprinted down the tunnel. The air was damp, the space barely wide enough for them to run. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting long, shifting shadows. Behind them, the pounding on the door stopped. Then, silence. Marcus slowed. Why'd they stop? James' stomach twisted. They're not giving up that easy. As if in response, a shriek echoed from the darkness ahead of them. Lisa gasped. They're in the tunnel. A shadow moved at the far end. More of them. Waiting. They were trapped. The ambush. Marcus raised his rifle. We fight our way through. Emily's voice cracked. We can't. James reloaded his shotgun. We don't have a choice. The Evolve charged. James fired first, the blast ripping through one's chest. It staggered, but didn't fall. Lisa screamed and emptied her pistol into another. It barely flinched. Headshots only. Marcus roared. Another creature lunged. Marcus fired, the bullet tearing through its skull. This time, it dropped. James pumped his shotgun and fired at a second one, blasting its head apart. For a split second, there was hope. Then something hit him hard. James crashed against the tunnel wall, his vision blurring. The lead Evolved loomed over him, grinning. It spoke. You can't stop it. James gritted his teeth. Watch me. He jammed his shotgun under its chin and pulled the trigger. Boom! The creature's head exploded. Lisa grabbed his arm. Come on. They ran. The tunnel opened into a drainage ditch outside the cabin's perimeter. Fresh air hit them like a shockwave. They scrambled out, gasping. Behind them, the Evolve didn't follow. They just stood in the tunnel. Watching. Grinning. Like they knew something. Marcus scowled. Why aren't they chasing us? James' chest heaved. They don't need to. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? James swallowed hard. They're not trying to kill us. He turned toward the distant city, where fires still burned. They're hurting us. Lisa paled. Toward what? James looked at the map from the bunker. Blackwood Research Facility, Site B. The cure, he muttered. Marcus clenched his fists. Then we get there first. They didn't know what waited for them at Blackwood. But they were about to find out. The night air was thick with smoke and decay as James led the group through the abandoned streets toward Blackwood Research Facility, Site B. Fires still smoldered in the distance, casting eerie shadows against the ruins of what was once a bustling city. The roads were littered with wrecked cars, shattered glass, and the grotesque remains of those who hadn't been lucky enough to escape. Marcus checked the map under the dim glow of a flashlight. We're close. About a mile east. Lisa frowned. No infected? James tightened his grip on his shotgun. That's what worries me. The Evolved had let them go. That meant they were meant to reach Blackwood. But why? Emily's voice wavered. What if this is a trap? No one had an answer. Blackwood Research Facility. The facility loomed ahead, a massive concrete structure with reinforced steel fencing. The front gate had been blasted open, leaving a twisted wreck of metal and wire. Blood smeared the walls. Corpses, human and something else, lay scattered across the ground. Marcus muttered, looks like someone else tried to get in, and failed. James motioned forward. Guns up. Stay close. They stepped over the bodies and moved inside. The entrance hall was a wreck, overturned desks, shattered monitors, and dried pools of blood. Flickering emergency lights cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. The stench of rot filled the air. Lisa pointed to a sign on the wall. Bioweapon research lower level. Emily hugged herself. That's where the antidote would be, right? James nodded. Let's move. They crept deeper into the facility, their footsteps echoing down empty corridors. The silence was suffocating. Then they heard it. A clicking sound. Lisa stopped. What the hell is that? The clicking grew louder. Closer. James raised his shotgun. Something's coming. Then they appeared. The Alpha strain. Out of the darkness emerged 3 figures. At first, they looked like the evolved infected. But something was different. Their bodies were larger, their muscles unnatural. Their skin wasn't just pale, it was reinforced with black, chitinous plating, almost like armor. Their movements were smooth, calculated. Their black eyes locked onto the survivors. One of them smiled. Then, it spoke. You shouldn't have come. James fired. The shotgun blast hit its chest, and barely did anything. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Lisa screamed. Run! They sprinted down the hallway as the Alpha strain pursued them. One leaped, landing just inches behind Marcus. He spun, firing point blank into its head. This time, it dropped. James shouted, "Headshots work. Aim high." Lisa fired at another, her bullet piercing through its skull. It crumpled. But the third Alpha didn't attack. It just watched. Then it whispered, "Go ahead. Find your cure." It smiled as if it knew something they didn't. Then it vanished into the shadows. Lisa's breathing was ragged. What the hell was that? James shook his head. We don't have time to figure it out. The lab is close. Let's go. The truth behind Virus 666. They reached the lab, a secure chamber at the end of a long hallway. Marcus kicked the door open, and they rushed inside. Rows of computers lined the walls. Broken test tubes and blood-stained notes were scattered across the desks. A large containment chamber sat in the center of the room, its glass shattered. Lisa ran to the main console. The files are still here. James scanned the room. Find the antidote. Lisa accessed the research logs. A video file appeared on the screen. A scientist, Dr. Evelyn Carter, looked into the camera, her face pale with fear. If you're seeing this, you're too late. Emily gasped. We thought we could control it. We were wrong. The virus adapted. It learned. And now, it's using us. James narrowed his eyes. What does she mean? Dr. Carter continued, her voice trembling. The evolved infected, they aren't just random mutations. They were designed to be the next step in human evolution. Smarter. Stronger. But something unexpected happened. Lisa's fingers curled into fists. What? Dr. Carter's eyes darted around, as if she feared she was being watched. The virus didn't just make them stronger. It gave them a hive mind, a collective intelligence. They aren't just changing. She leaned in close. They're planning. A loud bang from outside the lab made everyone jump. Then, footsteps. Emily's voice cracked. They're here. James grabbed Lisa's arm. Where's the antidote? Lisa's face paled as she scanned the files. There isn't one. James froze. What? Lisa turned the screen toward them. Final phase, Virus 666, Global Activation Protocol. James' blood ran cold. What the hell does that mean? Dr. Carter's last words echoed through the speakers. You don't understand. There is no cure. The virus, it wasn't meant to infect just a few. James' heart pounded. It was meant to infect the entire planet. The lights went out. And the Evolve began to laugh. The lab was plunged into total darkness. Then, laughter. Not human. Not mindless zombie growls. Something between the two. James' breath came fast and shallow. He tightened his grip on his shotgun. Lisa, Tell me you're wrong. Tell me there's a cure. Lisa's voice was a whisper. There's nothing here, James. Emily sobbed. Then, it's over? Marcus growled, flicking on his flashlight. Not yet. He aimed it at the doorway. And there they stood. The Evolved. The Alphas. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. The leader, a tall, grotesquely elongated figure, stepped forward. Unlike the others, his skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent, revealing the black veins pulsing beneath. His black eyes shimmered like polished stone. You understand now, he said, his voice smooth, almost comforting. There was never a cure. There was only transformation. Lisa clutched the desk behind her. Why the hell would you tell us this? Why not just kill us? The Alpha tilted his head. Because you are like us. You are already infected. James' stomach dropped. Lisa shook her head violently. No. No, that's not possible. The Alpha chuckled. How long have you felt stronger? More alert? How long have your wounds healed, faster than they should? James clenched his fists. The cut he got from the tunnel door, he had barely noticed it. The bruises from fighting, already fading. Lisa swallowed. You're lying. The Alpha smiled. Am I? The virus wasn't just killing people. It was choosing. The weak? The slow? The panicked? They became fodder. Mindless hordes. The strong? The ones who survived. They were becoming something else. Something new. James' hands shook. Then why haven't we turned? The Alpha's smile widened. Because you haven't accepted it yet. The words sent an icy dagger through James' spine. Lisa's breathing was ragged. No. No, I won't become that. The Alpha's head twitched slightly. You don't have a choice. Behind him, more Alphas stepped forward. Their black eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. James raised his shotgun. Like hell we don't. He fired. The shot took the Alpha in the chest. He staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he sighed. Still clinging to your old world. James pumped another round. You're damn right. The Alpha exhaled. So be it. They attacked. The last stand. Marcus went down first, tackled by an Alpha twice his size. He jammed his knife into its throat, but the creature barely flinched. Lisa fired her pistol wildly. Headshots. It's the only way. Emily screamed as an Alpha lunged at her. James yanked her back and fired, blasting its head apart. We need an exit. Marcus roared, wrestling free. Lisa scanned the lab, then pointed. The emergency blast doors, over there. They ran. James kicked over a lab cart to slow the infected. The Alphas followed, moving fast, too fast. Lisa reached the control panel first. Come on, come on. She slammed a red button. A siren blared. The heavy steel doors began to lower. Emily slipped through. Marcus dove under just as an Alpha grabbed his leg. James spun and fired, the shot ripped through the creature's arm. Marcus scrambled free. Lisa was last. She turned to run. An Alpha grabbed her. James lunged, grabbing Lisa's arm. She screamed, kicking wildly as the Alpha's grip tightened. James, she gasped, eyes wide with fear. The door kept closing. The Alpha pulled her closer. Its black eyes gleamed. Stop fighting. You belong with us. Lisa's fingers slipped. James had to choose. Let go, or be dragged into the darkness with her. His heart shattered. I'm sorry. He let go. The last thing James saw was Lisa's terrified face disappearing behind the steel doors. Then, silence. A new beginning. James fell to his knees, his chest heaving. Emily sobbed against the wall. Marcus stood, fists clenched, shaking with rage. Lisa was gone. James wanted to scream, to break something, to go back in there and save her. But it was too late. A long, echoing laugh rang out from behind the sealed doors. The Alpha's voice, muffled but clear. "See you soon." Marcus turned away, eyes burning. "We need to go." James barely heard him. His hands trembled. His body ached. The Alpha's words echoed in his mind. "You haven't accepted it yet." Was it true? Was the virus already inside him? No. No, he wouldn't let it happen. But deep inside, something whispered. Something, waiting. Emily sniffled. "Where do we go now?" James exhaled sharply. "We find survivors. We fight. We end this." Marcus nodded. James glanced back at the steel doors. Lisa was gone. The world was falling apart. But the war was far from over. And if Virus 666 thought humanity would just roll over and die, it had another thing coming. The end, for now.